Hey everyone, Clio here, and today I'm going to be talking about my November TBR, my November pile of possibilities. Already I'm going to apologize for this lighting, but we have entered into winter time and so it becomes dark so soon, so I wasn't able to film this before the lighting and the natural lights had gone. Should maybe really start buying myself a little ring light or something like that. But so today I'm going to be looking at the books that I want to read in November, and November, just like October, is going to be a month in which I'm like struggling to balance out rereads and new reads. I still want to reduce my physical TBR as much as possible before the end of the year to kind of meet my goal of reducing it to 100 books. However, I also want to participate in some rereads, and I want to do a certain reread for a book that is coming out, so yeah. I have quite some rereads on here, and some of them are pretty damn big. But so let's just dive into it. So as I said at the beginning of this video, this is my November TBR, my November pile of possibilities. And that means that I just have more flexibility when it comes down to this. You know, some people have a TBR that's really fixed. Mine is something that fluctuates. It's possible that I don't read all of this, which like, you can take it for granted that I won't read all of these. And there's a possibility of me adding some books to this if I feel like reading certain books that I didn't put on this list. So let's dive into the list. First off is a very short novel, and that is Desire by Haruki Murakami. So this is actually a collection of 4 of his short stories that Vintage came out with. So this is in their Vintage mini series. So yeah, this is very just like short palate cleanser, one that will make an easy dent into my TBR a little bit. It's also one that I got quite recently. I like Murakami a whole lot, but I haven't read any of his short novels yet, so I'll be very interested to look at his short stories. Next up, it's been on my TBR for quite a few months already, and that will be The Stone Sky by N.K Jemisin. So this is the 3rd book in the Broken Earth trilogy. The Broken Earth trilogy takes place on this Earth that has been devastated by like natural disasters, and so Earth is almost like a character in itself. And so at some point in this past, humanity has really upset Earth, and so there have been these sort of like seasons that are kind of like end of world type scenarios, and so this is one. And so we are at the onset of a new season, of the 5th season. And so we are following some people who actually have control over Earth, who have powers to control and quell earthquakes, for example. However, they're very much looked down upon, but we will be following these characters. So we're following 3 perspectives that are at different stages of their sort of like paths towards becoming a full-grown origin, as these people are called. But so yeah, I love these 2 previous works in this series so much. They've each won the Hugo Award, and for due reason, because they really are very different from any other fantasy that I've read. You know, structure is very difficult, very complex, very much more like a sort of literary fiction novel in a sense. You're very much kind of left to your own devices. You kind of need to puzzle out what is happening and make connections for yourself. So there's really not much hand-holding taking place here, which is kind of what makes it a little bit more difficult to dive into this series, because at the beginning you will definitely feel kind of lost, but it is also very rewarding in the end. So yeah, very much looking forward to diving into that 3rd one finally, because I really hope that I can get it done before the end of the year. Next up we have Such a Fun Age by Kiley. Reid. This is a book that is longlisted for the Booker Prize. I don't think it made it onto the shortlist, but I might be mistaken about that. So the Booker Prize is awarded in November. I usually try to read the entire shortlist. I'm also going to try to read the long list this year, but I never intend to kind of try and finish it before the winner is announced, because that would just mean making it my absolute priority, and it just isn't for me. But so Such a Fun Age, I've been told it's very much a story about sort of like, you know, performative allyship. So we have at the beginning of this novel, we have a white woman who has a black nanny. And so this nanny is stopped in the supermarket one day, and they accuse her of kidnapping her employee's child. Now the situation is apparently rectified quite soon, but as a result, her employer seems to be like trying to prove her allyship in a very fake performative way, and a very invasive way as well. I've been hearing very good things about this one, so I'm very interested to dive into it. It was one of my most anticipated books for 2020. It came out like in January, I think, already, and so I still haven't read it, but I hope I can still get around to it. Next we have Meanwhile in Dopamine City by BBC Pierre. I just love this cover, I really want to read it, but also it just sounds very intriguing because it's about like modern technology and our relationship to modern technology. I just recently finished a book that was actually about that as well, which was Little Eyes by Samantha Schweblin. And so I'm actually more eager now even to dive into it. But so we're looking at this one, we're looking at a father-daughter relationship, and so the father, I think, is taking care of his daughter on his own, but you know, as his daughter is growing older, she starts to feel like she needs certain things, you know, to fit in and things like that. And things go awry once he buys her first smartphone, because as of that moment he feels like he's losing his daughter, like she's kind of escaping into her own room, into her own world all the time, and that he's losing touch with her. So it sounds like a very interesting one. Then, so these were like 4 new novels that I want to read, and I actually kept this list down somewhat, but that's not really true because some of the rereads that I'm going to be adding to this and another book that I'm going to be adding to this are very, very long. So first off, we have Hard Times by Charles Dickens. I kind of told myself I wasn't going to read any Dickens this year, so in that sense this is probably the first book to go. So I'm on a mission to read all Dickens that is out there because I really enjoyed most of the Dickens that I've read so far, but past few years I have been feeling like, you know, I've been in a little bit of a rut with Charles Dickens because it is a lot of the same. But so Hard Times, as far as I'm aware, I think it's actually quite different from his usual work. It's also a whole lot shorter than most of the novels by him that I've read in recent years. And so for those of you who know, I am a Patreon for Kate Field, and so this is the book that we're going to be reading in November. So it's on there. It is relatively short, so in that sense it should be an easy addition, and maybe it'll happen if it has like an audiobook that I combine with The Sims. But yeah, it's definitely not a priority in that sense. But I do remember this, like, this was not a great introduction to Charles Dickens for me at the time, because I just remember it as being very bleak, quite boring. And what I now love most about Charles Dickens is like the humor in there, and those stereotypical characters in there. So I'd be interested to reread this at this point, having read more Charles Dickens, having loved his style, whether this one is really different from his other works or whether that was just my lack of interest at the time, the fact that I had to read it as required reading. The Two Towers by J.R.R. Tolkien, second book or second part of The Lord of the Rings. So I am following along to the Tolkien Along, which is hosted by Ashley from A Frolic to Fiction and Beth from The Book Nest, I think. And so the month of November it is time for the Two Towers. Now this is the shortest one of the 3 books in this trilogy, but I also remember it being quite a struggle because you are following Sam and Frodo for a very large portion of the time, and they are basically just climbing rocks for a very long time in this book. So it'd be very interesting to dive into this one, because during my reread of Fellowship of the Rings I actually found out that a lot of the problems that I had with Fellowship of the Rings were things that I really didn't struggle with anymore this time. You know, I didn't find it to be as dense as I originally thought it to be. I didn't have as much problems with there being so many songs or so many poems in there. So it'll be interesting to see now that I know what is coming. I know that this story is kind of split between following the rest of the Fellowship first and then following Sam and Frodo. And so that we don't move back and forth between the different perspectives. Now that I know that going into it, I'm interested to see what my experience is going to be like with this book this time around. And then we're going to dive into the majority of my reading for the month of November, because this might very well upset any plans that I've made up until now for this month, because I don't know what the timing is going to be for this. But I'm going to be rereading Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson, in anticipation of Rhythm of War. So I was originally going to be on holiday at the beginning of November, so I had planned to, I was going to be a week in Portugal with family, but due to COVID-19 that's not going to happen. And I plan to do my reread of this book during that week, and then hopefully still have time for something else. But so now I've moved my holidays, so I will be reading this in the evenings after work, and I don't know how fast it's going to go. I know that I originally read like Words of Radiance in 2 weeks, also during work weeks, but Oathbringer definitely took me just a little bit longer than Words of Radiance. But I do also know that like my rereads for Way of Kings and Words of Radiance have gone by even quicker than I've originally read these books. So perhaps Oathbringer is going to go by quicker as well, and I actually hope so, because that would still mean that I have time for any of these other reads. And then as of the 20th of November, I am on holiday until the end of November, and that is when I'll be reading A Rhythm of War. So I've tactically placed that holiday there. You know, I live in Belgium, I know I won't have this book on the first day. If I wanted to, I could buy it in the store, but I have the US editions, as you've seen, and so yeah, I want to continue with the US edition, so I'm going to have to order it online, and so I'm giving them 4 days or something after publication to reach me, for me to start reading this. I definitely hope that they can deliver that, because it's going to be very annoying if like my holiday starts and I don't have the books yet. But so yeah, that is definitely going to be my plan for my holiday. Hopefully I will fly through this, but I don't know, it'll depend. And so it's possible that this month will result into just me reading Oathbringer and Rhythm of War, but let's be positive and say that I will have time for something else as well. But so yeah, it's an interesting world in which people can kind of use the power of storms as to power their magic. However, this is very much a lost art. At the very beginning of this book we find out that there were these sort of like heroic creatures at times who were kind of defending mankind, who were keeping the forces of evil at bay, but they give up at some point. They say enough is enough, we've been through too much. And over the decades, centuries, this magic is lost to the people. But so evil is starting to stir again, and as a result, of course, the forces of good are also starting to rediscover their powers. But so yeah, that is going to be my November TBR. Let me know down below what your plans are for November. Are you also reading Rhythm of War? Because yeah, I'm so looking forward to it. But afterwards we'll have to wait so many years again for the next one, of course. But luckily Brandon Sanderson is coming out quite frequently with books, and so next year, for example, we'll have the next one in the Skyward series to look forward to. So yeah, see you guys for the next one, and wish me luck, because I'm definitely going to need it. Bye!